When my successful son Brandon invited me to live with him and his wife in their luxury condo in Charlotte, I thought I'd finally have the peaceful retirement I deserved. But every night at exactly 3 a.m., I'd hear the shower running. One night, curiosity got the better of me, and I discovered the horrifying truth about my perfect son. What I witnessed in that bathroom didn't just shatter my heart, it made me realize there were darker secrets hiding beneath his caring facade. Drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching this story unfold, and whether you think you would have had the courage to investigate those mysterious 3 a.m. sounds. The wrench slipped from my hands as the phone rang, cutting through the quiet of my garage. At 67, I'd grown comfortable with my small-town solitude, spending afternoons working on my old Chevy. Brandon's name on the caller ID made me smile. My son rarely called during work hours. "Hey there, son," I answered, wiping grease on my coveralls. "Dad, I've been thinking you should come live with us." The words caught me off guard. In 35 years of raising Brandon alone after his mother passed, he'd never made such a suggestion. "I'm worried about your health, Dad. Living alone at your age. What if something happens? What if you fall and nobody finds you?" His concern sounded genuine, though something felt rehearsed about his tone. "Son, I'm doing just fine." "Hold on, Dad. Hannah wants to talk." My daughter-in-law's sweet southern voice came through the line. "Hi, Dad Graham. We have this beautiful spare room with a city view. I could cook for you, and Brandon would feel so much better knowing you're safe with us." The way she called me Dad tugged at my heart. I'd missed having family around. Brandon returned to the phone. "It's our family duty, Dad. Mom would have wanted us to take care of each other." Invoking Sarah's memory sealed the deal. After an hour of gentle persuasion, I agreed to pack up my life. The following week blurred past with cardboard boxes and farewells. Mrs. Henderson brought a casserole in tears. "You're so lucky, Graham. Not everyone gets a son who cares this much." The 4-hour drive to Charlotte filled me with nervous excitement. The View Apartments towered 22 stories above uptown, all gleaming glass and steel. Brandon met me in the lobby, every inch the successful businessman in his tailored suit. "Welcome to your new home, Dad," he said, embracing me warmly. Hannah appeared in a yellow sundress, radiant and welcoming. "We're so excited you're here." Their apartment stunned me. Hardwood floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, furniture worth more than I'd made in months at the factory. My room overlooked a small park, complete with a new television and comfortable reading chair. Dinner exceeded every expectation. Brandon shared stories from his latest business deals, eyes bright with ambition. Hannah served perfect roast beef, constantly checking if I needed anything, if the seasoning was right, if I was comfortable. "This promotion has been incredible, Dad," Brandon said, cutting his meat with precision. "Regional manager means I'm responsible for 7 states now. The company's expanding, and they're counting on me to deliver results." Hannah beamed at him. "He works so hard. Sometimes I barely see him before midnight." "Success requires sacrifice," Brandon replied, his tone carrying that familiar authority. "But it's worth it when you can provide for family." As I watched them together, my accomplished son and his devoted wife pride swelled in my chest. Brandon had built something remarkable here. That night, lying in the unfamiliar luxury, I felt contentment I hadn't known in years. My son honored his family, cared enough to bring his aging father into his successful world. The city lights twinkled beyond my window like promises of peaceful days ahead. I thought I'd finally found the peace I deserved, but this perfect new life was about to reveal its dark secrets. Morning sunlight streamed through my window as Hannah's humming drifted from the kitchen. Those first 7 days felt like a dream I'd never dared imagine. Brandon left before dawn each morning, returning after 8, with shoulders heavy from work, yet he always checked on me first. "How was your day, Dad? Did you eat enough?" His genuine concern warmed something that had been cold too long. Hannah proved everything I could hope for in a daughter-in-law. She prepared meals that rivaled the best restaurants: tender pot, roast homemade cornbread, sweet tea that tasted like childhood. The apartment sparkled under her care, and she moved through daily routines with graceful efficiency, always wearing that serene smile. "Dad Graham want to walk the gardens with me?" she'd ask after lunch. I discovered the View offered more than luxury, it provided community. During walks, I met retired couples who'd chosen Charlotte for their golden years. Robert from Tennessee, a former police officer who shared my love of classic cars. Margaret from Georgia, whose late husband worked construction. "You're fortunate," Margaret told me by the pool. Not many young people understand family importance. Nights brought the deepest rest I'd known in years. No creaking floorboards or worrying about locked doors, just gentle air conditioning and distant city sounds settling into sleep. That first weekend, Brandon took me shopping. "You need new clothes, Dad. Can't look like a small-town mechanic in upscale Charlotte." At the department store, he introduced me to colleagues. "This is my father. Finally convinced him to move in. You raised a good son," one coworker said. "Brandon talks about you constantly. Says you taught him everything about hard work and integrity." The praise validated 35 years of wondering if I'd done enough as a single parent. But as the second week began, subtle changes crept in like shadows at dusk. Hannah's morning humming grew quieter, sometimes absent. Dark circles appeared under her eyes despite early bedtimes. "Just tired, Dad, Graham. Sometimes I don't sleep well," she'd say when I asked her smile more fragile. Brandon's evening check-ins became shorter. His patience showed cracks when Hannah served dinner 5 minutes late, or I asked too many work questions. "Dad, I've had a long day. Can we talk later?" he'd say, rubbing his temples. Tuesday night of that second week, something jolted me awake. An unidentifiable sound had penetrated the walls. I lay listening, but heard only silence. My bedside clock read 2:30. The next morning, neither mentioned anything unusual. Hannah served breakfast with her customary smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. Brandon scrolled through emails, muttering about difficult clients and impossible deadlines. Hannah moved more carefully now, like someone afraid of making mistakes. When she accidentally dropped a spoon during lunch, she flinched before picking it up, glancing toward Brandon's empty chair as if he might materialize to witness her clumsiness. "Everything all right, sweetheart?" I asked. "Of course," she replied quickly. "Just clumsy today." But her hands trembled slightly as she continued clearing dishes. By the second week, I started noticing small things that didn't quite add up. The heat wave that hit Charlotte that week made everyone dress lighter, yet Hannah continued wrapping herself in long sleeves and high necklines. Even during our afternoon walks, when temperatures soared into the 90s, she'd emerge from her room covered from wrist to throat. "Aren't you burning up in that sweater, honey?" I asked one sweltering Tuesday. "Oh, the air conditioning makes me cold," she replied, tugging at her sleeves. "I'm always freezing indoors." But I'd noticed the apartment stayed at a comfortable 72 degrees. That morning I'd wandered into the kitchen early, hoping to help with breakfast preparation. Hannah stood at the sink washing dishes, her back to me, sleeves pushed up past her elbows for the first time since I'd arrived. Dark purple marks circled her left wrist like a twisted bracelet. The sound of my footsteps made her spin around, yanking her sleeves down so quickly she knocked over the soap dispenser. "Good morning, Dad Graham," she said, her voice pitched higher than usual. "You're up early." "Hannah, what happened to your arm?" Her eyes darted toward the hallway before returning to mine. "Oh, that I'm so clumsy lately. Yesterday I was carrying groceries and caught my wrist on the car door handle. You know how easily I bruise." The explanation sounded rehearsed, but her nervous smile discouraged further questions. Over the following days, I watched her move through the apartment, like someone navigating a minefield. She checked and double-checked everything: the temperature of Brandon's coffee, the seasoning in his food, the exact placement of his newspaper and reading glasses. When she vacuumed, she moved furniture back to precise positions, measuring distances with her eyes. Brandon's mood had shifted too. He'd returned from work with storm clouds gathering in his expression, offering no explanation for his obvious frustration. The easy conversation from our first week had evaporated. Thursday evening brought the worst dinner yet. Hannah had prepared Brandon's favorite grilled salmon with asparagus, but something about it triggered his displeasure. "This fish is overcooked," he announced, pushing his plate away. "How many times do I have to tell you? 8 minutes per side, no more." "I'm so sorry," Hannah whispered, her hands trembling as she reached for his plate. "I must have lost track of time. Let me make you something else." "Don't bother. I've lost my appetite." The silence stretched until I couldn't stand it anymore. "Tastes fine to me, son. Your wife's a wonderful cook." Brandon's head snapped up, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity that made my stomach clench. For several heartbeats, nobody moved. Then his expression smoothed into something resembling normalcy. "Of course, Dad. I'm just tired. Long day at the office." But his tone carried an edge I'd never heard before. Hannah excused herself early, claiming a headache. I helped clear the table while Brandon disappeared into his home office, closing the door with more force than necessary. Around 11 that night, raised voices penetrated the walls between our rooms. The words remained indistinct, but the tone was unmistakable anger from one voice pleading from another. I pressed my ear to the wall, trying to make sense of the muffled conversation, but it ended abruptly. Friday morning, Hannah appeared for breakfast wearing a turtleneck, despite the weather forecast predicting another scorcher. A red mark peeked above the collar near her jawline. "Mosquito bite," she explained before I could ask, touching the spot self-consciously. "They're terrible this year, but mosquitoes don't leave marks that look like fingerprints." Something was happening in this house after dark, and I was determined to find out what. The digital clock's green glow read exactly 3 in the morning when the sound of rushing water jolted me from sleep. Not the gentle flow of a bathroom faucet, but the powerful cascade of a shower, running at full force. I lay still in the darkness, listening. The sound came from the master bathroom, separated from my room by a shared wall. After 15 minutes of steady flow, it stopped as abruptly as it had begun, leaving the apartment in complete silence. Sleep eluded me for the rest of the night. Who takes a shower at 3 in the morning? Was someone sick? Had there been an emergency I'd missed? At breakfast, I decided to ask directly. Brandon sat at the kitchen island, scrolling through emails on his phone, while Hannah prepared his usual scrambled eggs, wheat toast, black coffee. "Everything all right last night, son? I heard the shower running pretty late." Brandon's fingers paused over his phone screen. When he looked up, his expression held none of the warmth I'd grown accustomed to. "Work stress, Dad. Sometimes I can't sleep, so I take a cold shower to clear my head. Hope it didn't disturb you." "Oh, no trouble at all. Just wanted to make sure nobody was feeling poorly." Hannah remained silent throughout the exchange, her back turned as she worked at the stove. When she finally brought Brandon his plate, I noticed her hands weren't quite steady. "Maybe try some chamomile tea before bed," I suggested. "Your mother always said—" "I'm fine, Dad." Brandon's tone carried a finality that discouraged further conversation. The second night, 3 o'clock, brought the same torrential shower sounds. But this time, underneath the water's roar, I caught something else voices. Muffled, indistinct, but definitely 2 people talking. The tone suggested disagreement, though I couldn't make out words. Again 20 minutes of water, then sudden silence. The third night I lay awake from 2:30 onward waiting. 3 o'clock came and went without a sound. Maybe Brandon had found another way to manage his stress, but the fourth night shattered any hope that the pattern had ended. The shower started precisely at 3, and this time the voices were clearer, one deeper authoritative, another higher pleading, and underneath it all a sound that made my chest tighten, quiet sobbing. I found myself sitting up in bed, straining to hear more. The crying was definitely female, soft and desperate, barely audible over the water. When everything went quiet, 22 minutes later, I remained awake until dawn. Sleep became elusive. Each night I'd lie in bed from 2:30 onward, listening for sounds that might or might not come. Some nights brought the shower symphony. Others passed in merciful silence. The unpredictability made it worse somehow, like waiting for a storm that might never arrive. Brandon's explanation about work stress began to feel hollow. What kind of stress required such a specific, ritualistic response? And why did Hannah grow more withdrawn each day, her smiles becoming increasingly forced? During my morning walks with the neighbors, I found myself studying other apartments, wondering if anyone else heard unusual sounds at night. But the view's construction was solid, designed for privacy and quiet living. "You look tired, Graham," Margaret mentioned one afternoon by the pool. "Everything's settling in all right. Just adjusting to city sounds," I replied, not ready to voice my growing concerns. But lying awake that 5th night, listening to the familiar cascade begin at exactly 3 o'clock, I knew this wasn't about adjustment or city living. This was about something far more troubling happening just beyond my bedroom wall. I'd spent 30 years supervising workers. I knew the sound of trouble when I heard it. That night I positioned myself deliberately. At 2:58 I lay fully clothed, on top of my covers, every muscle tense with anticipation. Whatever was happening in this apartment, I was going to witness it firsthand. 3 o'clock arrived with mechanical precision. The shower roared to life, but this time I was ready. Slipping from my bed, I moved through the darkened hallway with the careful steps of a man who'd spent decades walking factory floors without disturbing sleeping machinery. The apartment's layout worked in my favor. A long corridor connected all the bedrooms, and the master bathroom sat at the far end. As I drew closer, voices became distinct beneath the water's cascade. Brandon's tone carried authority and menace, while a higher voice pleaded in response. My heart hammered against my ribs as I approached the partially open door. What I saw through that narrow gap will haunt me until my dying day. Hannah stood beneath the shower's full force, fully clothed in her nightgown, the fabric clinging to her shivering frame. The water ran cold, I could tell from the way her whole body convulsed with each second under the stream. Brandon gripped her hair with one hand, holding her head back, forcing her to take the icy torrent directly in her face. "Next time you embarrass me in front of my father," he hissed, his voice barely audible over the water, "remember this feeling. Remember how helpless you are." Hannah's response was barely a whisper. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Please, Brandon, I didn't mean—" "Shut up." His grip tightened. "You made me look bad when you dropped that plate at dinner, like I can't provide a wife who has basic coordination." She'd dropped a plate I hadn't even noticed, but apparently that minor accident had warranted this torture. My first instinct screamed to burst through that door to grab my son and throw him against the wall. But 30 years of managing dangerous situations had taught me the value of strategic thinking. If Brandon discovered me now in his current state of rage, what might he do to Hannah? What might he do to me? Hannah's legs gave out, and she would have collapsed, if not for Brandon's grip on her hair. Her quiet sobs mixed with the water's roar, creating a symphony of suffering that cut through my soul like glass. "Are you going to be more careful?" Brandon demanded. "Yes," she gasped. "Yes, I promise." "Good, because next time it won't just be cold water." The threat hung in the air like poison. I backed away from the door, my legs trembling so violently I nearly stumbled. Somehow I made it to my room and closed the door silently behind me. I collapsed onto my bed, my mind reeling. The son I'd raised, the boy I'd taught to respect women, to protect those weaker than himself, had become a monster. Every principle I'd tried to instill in him had been twisted into something dark and cruel. Sleep was impossible. I lay there until dawn, my thoughts racing between horror and strategy. Confronting Brandon directly could escalate his violence. Calling police without evidence might make things worse for Hannah, but doing nothing meant being complicit in her suffering. By morning, one thing had crystallized in my mind. I couldn't save Hannah with righteous anger alone. I needed to be smarter than my son, more calculating than the predator he'd become. I had witnessed the unthinkable, and now I had to decide, confront him immediately, or find a smarter way to save Hannah. Breakfast felt like a performance I wasn't prepared to watch. Hannah moved around the kitchen with mechanical precision, her eyes puffy and red-rimmed, avoiding all eye contact as she prepared Brandon's usual meal. Every gesture seemed calculated to avoid drawing attention. Brandon, meanwhile, acted as if nothing had happened. He kissed Hannah's cheek when she served his coffee, complimented the perfectly scrambled eggs, and even asked about my plans for the day with what appeared to be genuine interest. "Dad, you should check out that new walking trail Margaret mentioned. Great exercise for someone your age." The casual normalcy of it made my stomach churn. How could he sit there sipping coffee and discussing walking trails 12 hours after torturing his wife in their bathroom? Hannah's hands trembled slightly as she buttered my toast, and I caught her wincing when she reached for the orange juice. Brandon noticed nothing, or pretended not to. After he left for work, the apartment fell into heavy silence. I sat at the kitchen island, wrestling with choices that felt impossible. Call the police immediately. With what evidence my word against a successful businessman's describing events I'd witnessed by spying through a bathroom door? Brandon would deny everything. Hannah might be too terrified to confirm my story, and then what he'd know I was on to him, and Hannah would pay the price for my interference. Confront Brandon directly. Demand he stop hurting his wife. That approach could backfire catastrophically. Men who abuse their partners don't respond well to challenges to their authority, especially from family members. I might provoke him into worse violence. Take Hannah and run an old man and a traumatized young woman fleeing with no resources. No plan, nowhere to go. Brandon had money, connections, legal resources. He'd find us, and when he did, Hannah would suffer consequences I couldn't bear to imagine. Sarah's voice echoed in my memory from years past advice she'd given me during a particularly difficult decision at the factory. Think before you act, Graham. But don't think so long that you fail to act at all. The answer came to me gradually. Hannah needed to know she wasn't alone, that someone had witnessed Brandon's cruelty and believed her. But more than that, she needed to be part of any solution. This was her life, her choice to make. I could offer support, but I couldn't rescue her without her consent and cooperation. Throughout that day, I observed Brandon with new eyes. When he returned from work, he transformed back into the caring husband and devoted son. He brought Hannah flowers, just because, and spent 20 minutes asking about my day, listening with apparent fascination to my mundane activities. The performance was flawless. No wonder Hannah felt trapped. Who would believe that this charming, successful man was capable of such cruelty? He'd probably been perfecting this dual nature for years, maybe his entire adult life. I recognized the type from my factory days supervisors who could be your best friend in front of management and your worst enemy when no one was watching. Brandon had simply applied those manipulation skills to his marriage. That evening, as I listened to his animated discussion of a new client acquisition, I realized I was looking at a master manipulator, someone who understood exactly how to present different faces to different audiences, how to isolate his victim while maintaining his public image. My plan crystallized tomorrow. When Brandon left for work, I would approach Hannah carefully, gently. I would tell her what I'd seen, assure her that I believed her, and ask how I could help. Whatever she decided, I would support her decision. I knew what I had to do, but I had no idea how dangerous that conversation would become. The sound of running water led me to the kitchen where Hannah stood at the sink, washing dishes with the methodical movements of someone trying to stay busy. Her shoulders tensed when my footsteps approached. "Hannah, I need to talk to you about something important." She spun around, eyes wide, with the kind of panic I'd seen in factory workers who thought they were about to be fired. "Did I do something wrong? Is it about breakfast? I know the eggs were a little—" "No, sweetheart. You didn't do anything wrong." I kept my voice gentle, the way I used to speak to Brandon when he was small and frightened. "I'm worried about you." Her hands gripped the dish towel so tightly her knuckles went white. "I don't understand. I saw what happened in the bathroom last night." The towel fell from her hands as her legs gave out. She sank into one of the kitchen chairs, her face crumpling as sobs shook her entire body. Not the quiet, suppressed crying I'd heard through the walls, but deep, wrenching sounds of someone who'd been holding back tears for far too long. "Please," she gasped between sobs. "Please don't tell him you know. He'll kill me. He's told me he'll kill me if anyone ever finds out." I knelt beside her chair, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Hannah, listen to me. I'm not here to make things worse. I'm here to help you." It took 20 minutes for her to calm down enough to speak coherently. The story that emerged made my blood run cold. 18 months of escalating abuse. Brandon's threats to destroy her reputation to make sure no one would ever believe her if she tried to leave. Financial control that left her with no resources of her own. "He says I'm stupid, that I can't survive without him," she whispered. "Maybe he's right. He's wrong about that, and about everything else. But we need evidence before we can act. We need to be smart about this." Hannah nodded, wiping her eyes. "Where can we talk safely? He has cameras in some rooms, and he checks my phone." "His office," I suggested. He'd never record himself. Brandon's home office was a shrine to his success awards on the walls. Expensive furniture, everything perfectly organized. Hannah moved nervously toward the window while I examined his desk, looking for anything that might help us understand his methods of control. What I found made my hands shake. Medical records with my name documenting early onset cognitive decline, and inability to make sound financial decisions. A glossy brochure for Sunset Manor, one of Charlotte's most expensive nursing homes. Email drafts addressed to lawyers, discussing guardianship proceedings and asset management. "Hannah," I called, my voice hoarse, "come look at this." She read over my shoulder, her face growing pale. "Oh my God, he's been planning this since before you moved in." The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. The concerned phone calls about my health, the insistence that I needed care, the way he'd isolated me from my old life, making me dependent on his version of family. "He doesn't just want to control you," I said, sinking into Brandon's leather chair. "He wants to control both of us. Your freedom, my assets, everything." Hannah's hand found mine. "We're both his victims." For the first time since I'd witnessed that horrible scene, I felt something other than helpless rage. I felt determination. Brandon had made a crucial mistake. He'd underestimated both of us. He saw Hannah as a weak woman he could break, and me as a confused old man he could manipulate. He was wrong on both counts. "We're going to stop him," I said, squeezing Hannah's hand. "But we have to be smarter than he is." Hannah straightened in her chair, and for the first time since I'd arrived, I saw steel in her eyes. "What do we need to do? We weren't just fighting for Hannah's freedom anymore. We were fighting for both our lives." From the privacy of my bedroom, I dialed the number Hannah had found in the phone book. Robert Martinez, family law attorney, answered on the third ring. "Mr. Martinez, I need help with a domestic violence situation, I said quietly, keeping my voice low, even though Brandon was at work. Are you in immediate danger, sir? Not me directly, but my daughter-in-law is. And there's financial elder abuse involved, too. His tone sharpened with professional interest. I can see you today if necessary. What evidence do you currently have? Eyewitness testimony to physical abuse and documents showing fraudulent medical records about my mental capacity. Good start. You'll need audio recordings, photographs of injuries, medical documentation, and written records of threats. Can you gather these safely? Over the next week, Hannah and I became careful conspirators. She purchased a small digital recorder with her grocery money, hiding it in her pocket during Brandon's increasingly frequent verbal attacks. The audio quality wasn't perfect, but it captured his threats clearly. You're worthless, his voice hissed through the tiny speaker during our review session. Nobody would want you if they knew how pathetic you really are. Hannah's response barely audible. I'm sorry, I'll try harder. You'd better. Because if you ever embarrass me again, you'll regret it. While Brandon worked, I photographed every document in his office. The fake medical evaluations, the nursing home brochures, email, correspondence with lawyers about guardianship proceedings. Each image went to our secure email account that Hannah had created using the library's computers. Look at this, Hannah whispered one afternoon, showing me a bank statement she'd found. He's been moving money from your accounts into his name. Small amounts, but consistently. The financial theft added another layer to our case. Martinez had been right. We needed comprehensive evidence of both crimes. 3 weeks into our evidence gathering, Hannah revealed the complication that changed everything. Graham, I need to tell you something. She sat across from me in the apartment's small library, hands folded protectively over her stomach. I'm pregnant. 8 weeks. My heart clenched. Does Brandon know? Not yet. I'm terrified to tell him. He's always said he doesn't want children, that they'd interfere with his career. The pregnancy added urgency to our timeline. Hannah couldn't endure much more abuse in her condition, and we couldn't risk Brandon discovering her secret before we were ready to act. Martinez helped us contact Safe Harbor Charlotte's women's shelter, arranging a bed for Hannah when the time came. We also alerted Detective Tom Bradley at Charlotte PD, giving him advance notice of the domestic violence situation without revealing our specific timeline. When you're ready to act, call immediately, Bradley advised. Don't wait. Don't give him time to destroy evidence or hurt anyone. I spent hours at the library researching my legal rights and gathering medical records, proving my mental competency. Dr. Williams, my physician back home, provided written testimony that I'd never shown signs of cognitive decline. Hannah practiced her escape route from the apartment to the parking garage, then to Safe Harbor. We rehearsed what she'd say to Brandon when she asked for the divorce, how she'd get out safely if he became violent. Friday. Martinez confirmed during our final phone consultation. Serve him with papers on Friday evening. Hannah, you leave immediately afterward. Graham, you call 911 the moment things escalate. Our evidence filled an entire digital folder. Dozens of audio files, photographs of documents and injuries, medical records, financial statements showing theft, and witness testimony from neighbors who'd heard arguments through the walls. Friday arrived with unseasonable warmth. Hannah moved through the apartment like someone preparing for battle, checking her emergency bag one final time. I reviewed our contact numbers, Martinez Detective Bradley Safe Harbor 911. We had our evidence and our plan, but we couldn't predict how far Brandon would go to keep his secrets. Friday evening arrived with the weight of inevitability. Hannah had spent the day moving through her routines, like someone preparing for surgery, necessary but terrifying. When Brandon walked through the door at 6:30, she was waiting in the living room, divorce papers in her trembling hands. Brandon, I can't do this anymore. I want a divorce. The words hung in the air like a lit fuse. For a heartbeat, Brandon stood frozen briefcase still in his grip. Then his face transformed into something I'd never seen before, pure, uncontrolled rage. You what? His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. I said I want... His hand struck her cheek with a crack that echoed through the apartment. Hannah stumbled backward, papers scattering across the hardwood floor. That's enough, I shouted, rising from my chair. I'm calling 911. Brandon whirled toward me, his eyes wild. Nobody's calling anybody. This is my house, my wife, my business. But as I reached for my phone, the sound of footsteps thundered up the stairwell. Detective Bradley and 3 uniformed officers burst through the door we'd left unlocked, weapons drawn. Charlotte PD, step away from her. Brandon's face went from rage to confusion to dawning horror as the officers surrounded him. "What is this, Dad? What did you do?" "I protected an innocent woman," I said as they cuffed him. "Something you should have learned to do." The paramedics arrived minutes later, checking Hannah's injuries while I gave my statement. As they loaded Brandon into the patrol car, he looked back at me through the window, with eyes full of hatred and disbelief. 3 months later, the Charlotte County Courthouse became the stage for justice. Martinez presented our evidence methodically: audio recordings of threats, photographs of injuries, financial documents showing theft, and my eyewitness testimony of the bathroom abuse. The prosecution revealed Brandon's complete scheme: fake medical records, nursing home arrangements, guardianship papers, and systematic theft of my assets. He'd planned to have me declared incompetent within 6 months, gaining control of my life savings while keeping Hannah trapped through fear and isolation. Judge Patricia Williams showed no mercy. "Mr. Brandon Mitchell, you have violated the trust of both your wife and your father in the most heinous ways possible. This court sentences you to 5 years in state prison with a permanent restraining order against both victims and full financial restitution." Hannah received full custody of our unborn child and all marital assets. Brandon's lawyer's attempts to claim his innocence crumbled under the weight of evidence. 6 months after that terrible Friday night, I moved into a cozy one-bedroom apartment just 3 blocks from Hannah's new home. She'd used her settlement to buy a small house with a garden far from the luxury tower that had been her prison. Emma arrived on a sunny Tuesday morning in March, 7 pounds of perfect health and her mother's gentle spirit. As I held my granddaughter for the first time, her tiny fingers wrapped around mine, I felt a completeness I hadn't known was missing. "Thank you," Hannah whispered from her hospital bed, "for everything. Thank you for being brave enough to fight back. Standing up to family members is the hardest thing you'll ever do, but protecting innocent people is always worth the pain. Real men don't use power to control, they use it to protect." Today, as Emma takes her first steps in Hannah's garden while I watch from my favorite chair, I understand something fundamental about family. Sometimes losing a son means gaining a real family, one built on love, respect, and the courage to do what's right. Looking back on this journey, I've learned that betrayal stories like mine teach us the hardest truths about family. Sometimes the people we love most are capable of the greatest cruelty. But God works through the darkest moments, showing us that real strength isn't about blood relations, it's about standing up for what's right. These grandpa stories remind me that age doesn't make us powerless. At 67, I discovered I still had the courage to fight battles I never imagined facing. When I see other betrayal stories in the news, I think about Hannah and Emma, and I know that speaking up was worth every painful moment. God gave me the wisdom to recognize the signs, the strength to gather evidence, and the determination to see justice through. Many grandpa stories end with isolation and regret, but mine became about redemption and new beginnings. Sometimes God asks us to make the hardest choice, choosing righteousness over family loyalty. The most profound betrayal stories aren't just about the pain inflicted, but about the healing that follows. Today, watching Emma play in her mother's garden, I see God's grace in action. He turned our suffering into strength, our fear into freedom. If my story resonates with you, please don't stay silent. Share this video with someone who might need hope. Leave a comment about your own experiences and subscribe to our channel for more stories that matter. Sometimes one person's courage to speak up can save another's life. Together we can break the cycle of silence that protects abusers and abandons victims.